A $20,000 drone just outsmarted the most powerful warship on Earth. It flew straight through America's defenses, photographed everything, sent the data home, and then got shot down. The Pentagon called it a victory. Iran called it Tuesday. Let me tell you something that the official press releases won't say out loud. Today, in the Arabian Sea, something happened that should be making headlines everywhere. Not because of what America destroyed, but because of what Iran accomplished before that destruction happened. A cheap Iranian surveillance drone flew 500 miles from its launch point on Iran's southern coast. It crossed through detection zones covered by satellite surveillance, airborne radar, guided missile destroyers, and some of the most advanced naval defense technology ever assembled by any nation. It approached one of the most powerful warships ever built. It photographed that warship, its position, its defensive layout, its escort ships, everything. It transmitted all of that intelligence back to Iranian commanders in real time. And then, only then, did an American F-35C fighter jet finally shoot it down. The mission was over. The drone had already done its job. And yet, within hours, U.S. Central Command was holding a press conference describing the intercept as proof of American defensive capability. That gap, between what actually happened and what officials are willing to say publicly, is exactly what this story is about. Because that gap is where the real danger lives. Before we get into what this means strategically, let's establish what was actually at stake here. Because the scale matters. The USS Abraham Lincoln is a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, nearly 1,000 feet long, over 100,000 tons. It carries roughly 90 aircraft, fighters, helicopters, electronic warfare jets. More than 5,600 sailors serve aboard it, and it never travels alone. Surrounding it at all times is a full carrier strike group, guided missile destroyers, submarines running silent in the deep water below, and fighters on constant alert rotation above. This is not just a ship, it's a floating fortress, the most protected military asset in human history. Layers of radar, layers of interceptor missiles, layers of electronic jamming. The whole system is designed so that nothing gets close without being detected, tracked, and destroyed long before it becomes a threat. Now, the Shahed 139 drone that penetrated those defenses costs approximately $20,000 to manufacture. Iran produces them domestically. They're not exotic. They're not stealthy. They have a propeller engine, a fixed wing, and an operational ceiling well within the detection range of standard naval radar. And it got through, not partially, completely. Iranian state media confirmed it explicitly. And this detail is critical. The Tasnim news agency, which operates as a direct communication channel for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, reported that the drone had successfully transmitted its reconnaissance and identification images to the Iranian command center before losing contact. That phrase, before losing contact, is everything. Losing contact means it was shot down. But the transmission had already happened. Iran had already received the data. The shoot-down didn't interrupt the mission. The mission was finished. Iran spent $20,000. They received current, detailed, real-world intelligence on the position, defensive configuration, and operational patterns of a $5 billion aircraft carrier. That is arguably the most cost-effective intelligence operation in recent military history. Here's where this gets genuinely alarming, and where I want you to think carefully about the implications. Iran didn't just collect pretty photographs today. They collected targeting data. Think about what a surveillance drone flying close to a carrier strike group can observe and record. The carrier's precise coordinates. The positions of escort destroyers relative to the carrier. Which aircraft are on deck, which are airborne, and in what configuration. The timing and pattern of combat air patrols. And critically, response times. How long from drone detection to fighter scramble? How long from scramble to intercept? Where in that defensive perimeter does the interception happen? Every one of those time intervals is now a number in Iranian military planning files. And in modern warfare, especially when you're planning a complex strike operation, those numbers are everything. Iran has developed a family of anti-ship missiles specifically designed to threaten American carriers, ballistic missiles with terminal guidance systems, cruise missiles that fly low and fast to avoid radar, and the doctrine to combine them in coordinated salvos designed to overwhelm defensive interceptor systems. These weapons have been developed over years, refined through testing, and positioned for exactly this kind of scenario. Until today, Iranian planners were working from older intelligence, satellite imagery, open-source data, historical patterns. Now they have current ground-level reconnaissance. They know where the Abraham Lincoln is right now, how it's defended right now, and how its crew responds to airborne threats right now. Military analyst Behnam Ben Taleblu from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies described the incident as a deliberate test. Not a provocation, not a miscalculation, a test. Iran wanted to know how America responds. Today they got their answer. And the answer apparently was, slowly enough that the mission completes first. The second incident, speedboats in the Strait. The drone wasn't even the only thing that happened today. And the second incident, while less dramatic, tells an equally important story about Iran's strategic thinking. Hours after the Abraham Lincoln incident, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps speedboats intercepted an American-flagged oil tanker called the Stena Imperative in the Strait of Hormuz. Two fast boats approached at high speed and ordered the vessel to stop and prepare to be boarded. The crew refused and accelerated. The USS McFall, a guided missile destroyer, rushed to the scene and escorted the tanker to safety. The Iranian boats backed off once American warships arrived. American press releases called this a failed Iranian interdiction. And technically, the tanker wasn't boarded. Mission failed, right? But look at it from Iran's perspective. Iran didn't need to board the tanker. What they needed to demonstrate was that they could send speedboats into the shipping lanes, intercept a commercial vessel, and hold the situation long enough to force an American guided missile destroyer to divert from whatever else it was doing to escort one commercial ship. They forced America to react to Iranian initiative. Iran chose the time, the place, and the nature of the confrontation. America responded. Now, consider the geography. The Strait of Hormuz is only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. 20% of the world's oil supply passes through it every single day. Iranian fast boat stations sit along the northern shore. A speedboat can leave an Iranian port, reach the shipping lanes, harass a tanker, and return before American warships can arrive from their patrol stations. If Iran is willing to commit to the action quickly enough. If Iran scales that operation, not one boat, not one tanker, but dozens simultaneously, the math for America becomes brutal. How many destroyers do you dedicate to escort duty? How many can you afford to pull off other missions? How do you protect every tanker in a 21-mile-wide strait against swarm attacks? Today was a proof of concept. It was Iran demonstrating that this option exists, that it works, and that America's response is to divert naval resources rather than deter the action from happening. There's a term that military strategists use for what Iran is doing: asymmetric warfare. And, it's been reshaping conflicts around the world for decades, but American military doctrine has been painfully slow to adapt to it. Here's the core problem. America's military is built for conventional peer competition. Carrier strike groups, fifth-generation fighter jets, precision-guided munitions, multi-billion-dollar warships, all optimized for fighting another major power with a comparable military. The entire system is designed around the assumption that the enemy will meet you at roughly the same technological level. Iran doesn't fight that way. Iran spends roughly $20,000 per drone and manufactures hundreds of them annually. Each one is, as far as Iran is concerned, completely expendable. They don't need it to survive. They just need it to complete its mission before it's destroyed. Retired Admiral James Stavridis, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, put the problem plainly. A posture where $100 million jets are routinely used to intercept $1,000 threats is not mathematically sustainable over any extended period. He's right, and the numbers make the problem visceral. One F-35C costs approximately $110 million. The Shahed 139 drone it shot down today cost $20,000. To defend against one Iranian drone, America deployed an aircraft worth 5,000 times more than the threat it was neutralizing. Now imagine Iran launching 50 drones simultaneously toward American naval assets. To shoot them all down, America scrambles fighters and fires interceptor missiles. Iran spends $1 million total. America potentially spends hundreds of millions countering the attack, even if every single drone is destroyed. And then Iran does it again next week, because they can afford to. This is the trap that American military planners are sitting in right now. Conventional superiority doesn't help much when your adversary has designed their entire military doctrine around making your superiority expensive to exercise. Trump's strategy and the trap it created. To understand why today's incidents matter beyond the tactical details, you need to understand what the Trump administration was trying to accomplish in the first place. The strategy was straightforward in theory. Deploy overwhelming military force near Iran. The Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, additional destroyers and combat ships, roughly 7,000 extra troops pre-positioned across the region. Issue explicit ultimatums. Demand Iran dismantle its nuclear program, surrender its ballistic missiles, and end support for regional proxy forces like the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon. And make it credible by keeping military options visibly on the table. The theory is called coercive diplomacy. The idea is that Iran, staring at this concentration of American military power, will calculate that the costs of defiance are simply too high and come to the negotiating table accepting American terms. What actually happened is Iran flew a surveillance drone through American carrier defenses, harassed an American tanker with speedboats, collected detailed military intelligence on U.S. naval assets, and then offered to negotiate, but only on their own terms, and specifically excluding missiles and proxy forces from any discussion. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed Central Command had acted appropriately, then immediately pivoted to saying Trump remains committed to diplomacy first, which raises an obvious question. If diplomacy is the priority, why is the most powerful carrier battle group in the world sitting 500 miles off Iran's coast? The answer is that the carrier is supposed to make Iran more willing to negotiate by demonstrating American resolve. But deterrence only works if the other side is deterred. And today's events suggest Iran is not deterred. They're probing, testing, demonstrating, doing exactly what a military that does not feel intimidated does when a powerful adversary parks forces near its coastline. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian formalized Iran's position by announcing openness to negotiations, but only if a suitable environment exists. In diplomatic language, that phrase is carrying enormous weight. A suitable environment, from Tehran's perspective, almost certainly means America steps back from military threats and comes to the table without preconditions, which is the opposite of everything Trump has publicly committed to. Trump is now trapped between two options, and honestly, today's events made both of them harder. Option 1. Order military strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, drone production sites, or IRGC naval bases. This would signal American resolve and potentially set back Iran's programs. But Iran now has detailed, current intelligence on the Abraham Lincoln's position and defensive configuration. An Iranian retaliatory strike against the carrier, using the exact targeting data collected by today's drone, could kill hundreds of American sailors. Even a near miss would be a geopolitical earthquake. Trump's military advisors are clearly warning him about this. It's why he keeps saying he'll decide very soon without ever actually deciding. Option 2. Step back from military threats and pursue genuine negotiations, accepting that any deal Iran will actually sign won't include missiles or regional proxies, which means accepting an outcome far short of what Trump has publicly demanded. That hands critics, both foreign and domestic, a narrative that the entire maximum pressure campaign was theater. Senator Lindsey Graham, who has rarely found an Iran threat he didn't want to respond to aggressively, acknowledged after today's briefings, "We need to be very careful about whether military action achieves our objectives or just triggers a costly, open-ended conflict." When Lindsey Graham urges caution about Iran, you know the situation is genuinely complicated. And meanwhile, negotiations scheduled this week are already stalling. Iran agreed to talks, then demanded the venue be changed from Istanbul to Muscat, Oman. Iranian negotiators have made clear they'll discuss nuclear issues, but absolutely will not put missiles or proxy activities on the table. Trump has described any deal that excludes those topics as unacceptable. There is no visible middle ground. Both sides are holding positions they've publicly committed to, with their domestic audiences watching to see who blinks first. Every day this standoff continues without resolution, Iran's intelligence picture of American capabilities gets sharper. Every probe that succeeds without serious consequences makes the next probe more likely, and every threat that goes unexecuted erodes the credibility of the next threat. This is what deterrence failure looks like. Not a dramatic single moment where everything collapses. A slow erosion where one side's threats gradually stop being taken seriously and the other side's confidence gradually rises. The official statements from U.S. Central Command were honestly pretty carefully constructed. Spokesman Captain Tim Hawkins described the Shahed drone as having approached the carrier aggressively with unclear intent, and said the F-35C engaged in self-defense to protect the ship and crew. Notice what that framing reveals. Unclear intent means American commanders weren't certain what the drone was doing, which means they were operating without complete situational awareness, while Iran was executing a precise, planned operation. Describing the intercept as protecting the crew from an approaching threat implicitly acknowledges the drone got close enough to the carrier to represent a potential danger. A drone that was intercepted safely and cleanly at long range doesn't threaten the crew. The fact that crew protection is even mentioned tells you something about how close this got. Senior military officials speaking anonymously to journalists, unable to use their names because the official line contradicts the honest assessment, described today as a meaningful intelligence loss. Iran now has current data on carrier operational patterns and defensive response timelines that they didn't have before this morning. That data matters because part of what makes a carrier strike group threatening is uncertainty. Adversaries can't be entirely sure how it's defended, where its gaps are, or how quickly it responds. That uncertainty is a form of deterrence in itself. Today's drone mission eliminated that uncertainty for Iran. The Pentagon's emphasis that no personnel were hurt and no equipment was damaged is real, and it's designed to redirect attention away from the larger strategic reality. Iran penetrated American carrier defenses, collected detailed intelligence, and transmitted that intelligence home before a single shot was fired to stop them. Step back from the details for a moment and look at what this situation actually represents. America deployed the most powerful naval strike force in human history to waters near Iran, explicitly as a demonstration of military power designed to pressure Iran into compliance. Iran responded by sending a drone that cost less than a used car through those defenses, collecting the most sensitive military intelligence possible, and sending it home, before acknowledging the drone's loss with something close to indifference. That's not how a deterred adversary behaves. That's how a confident one does. And the confidence is built on something real. Iran operates in its own backyard, with short supply lines, extensive coastal knowledge, and decades of experience designing asymmetric tactics specifically to exploit the vulnerabilities of large, expensive American military systems. America operates 10,000 miles from home, with long supply chains, political sensitivity to casualties, and military doctrine that's built for a different kind of war than the one Iran is fighting. Neither side wants full-scale conflict. Iran because it would be catastrophic for the regime. America because the costs and risks, including potential carrier casualties with the intelligence Iran just collected, are genuinely frightening to decision-makers. But neither side is willing to offer what the other side needs to reach a genuine settlement. Iran won't give up its missiles. America won't accept a deal without them. So we sit in this dangerous middle. American warships patrolling waters near Iran, Iranian drones probing those warships, negotiations stalling over incompatible red lines, and each passing week narrowing the space between an accidental escalation and a deliberate one. Here's the thought I want to leave you with. The drone that flew toward the Abraham Lincoln today didn't win because it was sophisticated. It didn't win because it was stealthy or fast or technologically superior. It won because it was cheap enough to be expendable, simple enough to be produced at scale, and designed with a mission profile that exploited the gap between what American defenses are built to stop and what an adversary willing to be creative can actually do. That gap, between the military power America projects and the actual deterrence that power produces, is the story of this entire standoff. And it's a gap that $100 million fighter jets can't close. Because the problem isn't the capability of the weapon. It's the strategy behind the weapon. Somewhere tonight, in a command center in Tehran, analysts are reviewing the footage that a $20,000 drone just delivered from inside the defenses of a $5 billion warship. They're measuring distances, studying configurations, calculating timelines. And the question that should keep American strategic planners awake, the question that today's events made sharper and more urgent, is simple. What are they planning to do with what they just learned? If this gave you a clearer picture of what's actually happening beneath the headlines, share it. The most consequential moments in geopolitics rarely arrive with fanfare. Sometimes they arrive quietly, at low altitude, and complete their mission before the alarm even sounds.